Boom. We should, in all available theory, be live. Let me take a look, though. And I'll turn off desktop audio so you don't hear it. Sounds good? Sounds good to me. Excellent. I can mute it and never think about it ever again, because no issues, as we all know, ever happen later. Right, I've achieved unfathomable technology in the meantime, which is I found the pop-out chat button. So now I have a smaller chat window for YouTube, which I can have side by side with other things. It's very nice. Which, I don't remember the controls. It's not E, is it Shift? Yes. Okay, so it's Shift to glide, that's the ability I got last time. It's been so long, I've completely forgotten. I remember that I think I'm the furthest I've ever been on this one life difficulty. I figured I'd start the stream. I have a topic to talk about, but I will give it a little... I'll give myself a little warm-up to work with. Whoa, gotta be careful because these guys do a lot of damage. And this frog is like a rocket launching man frog. Not very insightful commentary, I do have to admit. Oh right, yeah, because it's this level and it changes when you go back. So, ooh, very spooky. Anyways, oh, bird. Oh, let's not fly into a wall that does damage, shall we? Oh! I've made considerable mistakes. Alright. We're fine. We're good. Maybe? I want to be careful because I am really tired, which is a funny, as per usual, a funny way to start a stream. Oh, I'm so low on health, it's actually stupid. It's a funny way to start a stream that's supposed to be, you know, have thoughts in it and be like coherent, but that's what I usually do, so I think it's perfectly fine and valid. And there's no one here to say to me that it's a bad plan, a bad idea, or it's not gonna work. And as we know, if nobody says it's not gonna work, then it's going to work. Basically guaranteed. That's not a thing I can jump up. Did I just eliminate that? Oh, these are not spikes. Yeah, I think that illustrates the mental state at the moment. Oh hi, another ball. We here at this channel love balls. Sorry, that was uncalled for. I can like sit here, but that does nothing. Okay, let's try and not die for a little tiny bit. Wait, where am I supposed to go? Oh, back, because it changes. I just explained that. That's alright. Alright, we are in the misty woods, and the idea is that... I don't remember. One of the things we need to get is in here, or like through here. I think we get through here to another place. That's like the LMAO kind of situation. Can you shoot me again? Thank you. That's wonderful of you. Very polite for the tentacle to cooperate. This looks like a place I can go. It's a place I can go. It's look who it is. Okay, sorry. Bonus! Let's go. I'm waiting for Hunter to show up. That's the real reason why I'm stalling a little bit. Oh, I died. Excellent. We're back to a part of the game which I actually know, so it's going to get in the way less of me actually thinking. Pretty good excuse to just do the same thing over and over again forever. Alright. Boom. We're back at square one again. I have no abilities, I have nothing, but I have the knowledge of this part of the game. So, you know what, I'll start. I'll probably be repeating a bunch of ideas anyway at a later point, so might as well begin immediately and then go from there in case anything needs to be repeated or returned to. So, we've got this very contentious topic, or at least somewhat contentious topic on the internet that gets brought up from time to time, That is the question of objectivity versus subjectivity. And quite specifically versus, because it's usually in a fairly hostile engagement, I'd call it, between two groups of people. I just realized I don't have desktop audio on, because I turned it off so you don't hear the echo. So you missed out on audio for that whole segment. My bad, my apologies. It's a very contentious topic, in that some people feel very strongly about it, and other people also don't understand why like claiming objectivity is such a big deal to other people. So, because I'm exceedingly tired today, and the whole day I spent basically on doing things, I've decided this is the best moment to consider some of these issues and maybe figure out my own position on it in some detail. And so this, I don't know if I'm probably going to end up doing multiple streams or like ponderings on it that are not the final product, and then it's all in service of compiling it into probably video form, similarly to the response, which is actually released. That is something I can talk about in the meantime before Hunter gets here a little bit. Unless he doesn't get here and then I troll myself, but the video released, and by the video released I mean I released it, and Lucid has seen it, and he's responded fairly positively to it, so I think mission accomplished. I think I explained my points well enough for that to be of use to at least him and at least one other guy. We seem to be on friendly terms, at least, following the engagement in his server afterwards, because I've decided to actually post it to there, so he sees it. Seems like an important idea, you know, if you're responding to someone, for them to see it, but it takes a little finagling to fit that inside of my thick skull, so the finagling's been done, and I have, in fact, I messed up the animation skip. Horrible. So, yeah, it's released. I think, looking back on it, I would basically change nothing. I'm fairly happy with how the video is. And actually, the thing that finally convinced me in my own head to actually put the video in his server and directly, was that after I think a week or two of releasing it, I've decided to listen to it again, and I figured hey, okay, I think these arguments are pretty good, and I actually want people to see it. And so that was the final straw that convinced me to release my own video. It's truly incredible what being overly cautious and overthinking does to a man. So yeah, it kind of lit an interest in me in terms of pondering opinions and making my own take on them known, because I, you know, at the risk of sounding a little braggy, I think I have a particular perspective on things and a way of approaching topics that I don't think many other people do have. And so I'm just gonna do my thing, and I will figure out what happens in response. I think that's the plan. Discord's being weird with notifications. If you have an Android phone, you might want to check the app setting. I don't know if you might have done this already, but there's a thing called battery optimization, and basically any application that you want to actually have a function, you want to put it on unrestricted mode. Because in their infinite wisdom, Android system providers, which is basically whoever made your device, they are very happy about saving you battery life by just making your phone not do the things that you want it to do. And I've had this issue with basically every messaging app I have on my phone, where I had to manually unrestrict them from battery optimization if I wanted to receive message notifications. It's truly great technology. But anyway, Okay, you know what? I'm going to consult the graph, which I have in the background, to like figure out where I want to even start talking about the topic, because it's quite difficult. But I think a good place to start is where this, at least where I got the introduction to this issue, or at least, well, introduction, or like the first time I've seen people talk about it and fight about it. It's near the beginnings of EFAP, which is an internet podcast that the acronym stands for Every Frame a Pause, which means they basically watch videos in chronological order, linear format, but they pause a lot and talk about, like, use the video as a springboard to talk about other topics. And one of the contentious opinions that the people that run that have is that you can objectively assess the quality of art, and in their case mostly movies, because that's what they focus on. It's very contentious, I realize, very spooky and scary to think such things. And that is basically, like, that kind of debate is where I first heard of the issue and it as a kind of conflict. And then, like, various flavors of it have appeared in in various forms on other channels and media, like I've listened to. And the topic's kind of always in the background because it's very fundamental. And so the very start of it is basically, I think the way it started is that some people believe that there's no way to there's no such thing as an objective opinion, because, well, it's your opinion and you are a subject, right? Like, it's your perspective, your thinking, your ideas, and so like, an opinion cannot truly be objective. Just now, I don't think I agree with that, but it's a good starting point, so bear with me. So, as per usual, when there's something that sounds a little weird and I don't know what to think about it, definitions are always a good start. And so I have the definitions of, I've pulled up the definitions of opinion, objective, and subjective. I think I can go to OBS and click on this. There you go, that's a little file of mine, and the definitions are on the screen as well for your viewing pleasure. So, opinion is, at least if you look it up on Google and take the first result, is a view or judgment formed about something, not necessarily based on fact or knowledge. And then objective is of a person or their judgment, not influenced by personal feelings or opinions in considering and representing facts. And then subjective is based on or influenced by personal feeling, tastes or opinions, views or judgments. Oh yeah, I already added that, kind of spoiling my own line of logic that I'm going to go down. Because the first thing that I noticed about these definitions, and I remember the definition of opinion and objectivity specifically being cited in that first EFAP I watched about the topic, is that both of these definitions of objective and subjective, and I just alt-tabbed back into the game and forgot to switch scenes in OBS, pardon. Where's that? Game capture. Sorry. It's a lot to manage. That definition of objective and subjective is contains the word opinion within it. So if you take these definitions and start arguing about objective and subjective objective and subjective opinions, you've just introduced circular definitions into the conversation, which is pointless, and, well, pointless, it's bad. It doesn't lead you to a conclusion. So in order to, like, fix those definitions, I would replace the word opinion in both of them with the words from the definition of opinion. So, okay, let's show this again. So, objective would be not influenced by personal feelings or views or judgments in considering and representing facts. And then subjective is based on or influenced by personal feelings, taste, or views or judgments. So that they are. So now we've got an uncirculared definition, a coherent definition that can be used in tandem with opinions, because then, for the purposes of this topic, opinion is basically statements you make that contain a judgment. I think judgment. And I tabbed back into the game without toggling the scene in OBS. I should set up automatic scene switcher for this. That's my desktop. Pardon. Copyright infringement not intended. If I do that, does it work? Maybe. Okay, sorry. I'm very flubbing everything all the time. So, for the purpose of this discussion, or like this topic, the definition of opinion, the key part of the definition of opinion is that it is a view or judgment. So, this is very broad, because you can basically saying anything that has any kind of meaning is a certain judgment, because you are claiming something and then discerning between something and all the other things that you are not saying, effectively. Very semantic kind of line of logic, but it's this kind of topic. So hold on, somebody's knocking on my door, I think. Give me a sec. I'll mute. Okay, I am back. Sorry. Apparently, even 10:15 p.m. is not a good time to be alone. An opinion is saying a particular thing and not saying other things. Well, if you consider what a judgment is, then well, depending on how abstract you want to make judgment, but generally, if you want to say anything, there's going to be a certain level of judgment that you include in the thing that you say, just by nature of what language is, effectively. And I should have ended that with lol. Yeah. We say lol in this house sometimes. We do it when it's appropriate. When it's appropriate lollage. So, with that kind of frame, we've got, like, the definitions of objective and subjective are obviously opposites of each other, because they basically have the same content, but objective has the word not in front of it. Which is why I also, in the title of this stream, I only put objective, because I think it's very, like, easy and obvious to basically everyone that subjectivity is a thing. Because, well, you've disagreed with people on probably at least one occasion in your life. I'd assume that has happened to just about every human on planet Earth. So, it's very easy to conclude that people, in fact, have different views and different ideas and different concepts and different, like, ways of arguing, etc., etc. But I think the objective part is much more contentious. And the first, like, most obvious reason for that... What do I do? I think this. The first most, like, obvious and biggest reason that people are going to cite... Okay, is that what I actually want to start with? Yeah, I think so. I think that is what the first, like, line of importance is after we untangle the definitions. Is like, well, if an opinion is mine, and if I am saying it, and if I am making the call and selecting the words, etc., then can objectivity even exist, in fact? And that, I think that approach is basically the same as the argument that objective reality doesn't exist, because we only have, or either that objective reality doesn't exist, or that we don't have access to it because we filter, we don't have direct access to the objective reality. We filter it through our brains, through our perspective, our eyes, etc. So we always have like a flawed view of the world, and therefore we cannot have access to the objective, quote unquote. And while to a certain extent, certain degree, it is true, there's a lot of truth to it, I think we also, the other aspect of it is that for practical reasons, this doesn't matter. Because for practical reasons, and for basically everything you do in your life all the time, you assume that objective reality exists, and you build your life, and you build habits, and you do things without even thinking about it. Like you pick up a fork, and you stab your food, and you put it in your mouth, and then that, is nutritious. And then you use language, you say things that are true and accurate, and then you can think and come up with ideas that accurately describe the world, to the point where you can act on them and get results. There's no, it's not that. Like, some people would say that objective reality doesn't exist, but most would agree that, yeah, it probably does exist, but we don't have access to it. And that's basically what I'm trying to address. It's not that. Is that it's very similar to another argument, which is kind of a tangent, but there's an argument about free will. It's like, oh, we don't have free will, and for me, that argument has just about zero value, because in order to do anything, in order to literally do anything, you need to assume you have free will. You need to act like you have it. So it might be a philosophical discussion in the worst way a discussion can be philosophical, which is effectively pointless. Like, there's no conclusion, no useful conclusion to be drawn from it. It's just waffling about highly abstract concepts that effectively can't be attached back to reality, and if you try, it has horrendous consequences, because then you just become passive and effectively waste opportunities that you could have taken if you decided that maybe it is okay to do things. So I think establishing this, or at least showing why I make the assumption, is important, because that only then do we open up. On one hand, we open up a road to understanding what an objective claim is, and on the other, we also establish the relationship between us and objective truth in a correct way. Because the other extreme is the kind of trust the expertism approach to reality, which is there's some class of people, and this could be, our modern iteration is elders, but you could have them as prophets, or teachers in the spiritual, religious sense. The wise men who tell you things about spirituality. Not that there's no place for them, but these people fulfill the role of the mere mortals, the stupid people, effectively, are to refer to those figures for the objective truth, and those people actually hold the objective truth, and then from that point like from that point, you kind of take them as gospel, effectively. And then if you do that, it turns out these people are actually flawed, and they can, in fact, have opinions, views, judgments, etc., that are not congruent with reality, and then the model breaks down because you assumed something is true and it isn't, and that's going to lead to all sorts of contradictions. So it's important to establish that the relationship between us and objective truth is that we can approximate it. We can approximate it really, really well, to the point where it's extremely useful and extremely accurate. We don't quite have direct access to it, and we don't have a perfect understanding of or perfect knowledge or perfect rules for it. So you want to always have the degree of humility where you understand that there's a degree of separation, and then be very, like, continue being humble and being careful about what you consider true and what you consider false, because it's very easy to make wrong assumptions, especially when you have a very solid base and you know a lot. That is when it's easiest to make assumptions, because it might fit really well into your model, and then it turns out that it's not true, and in fact you would have to change your model, which is very difficult if you have it very ingrained in you. So you want to talk practically about the world? Shenanigans. Yeah, it's a horrible thought that somebody would want to have a philosophical discussion that isn't just abstract waffling that doesn't carry meaning. Sorry to all philosophers, but actually not sorry to all philosophers. Sorry to the people who like doing that, I guess. You can enjoy your, like, circle of infinite autism. You know what? And I am not free of this sin. I like my circles of infinite autism, but for the purposes of this discussion and generally, like, talking about it, if we stay in theoretical land, then you can theoretically have just about anything. Like, the complexity explodes because you don't have a tieback where you can cut off the abstraction. And the reason why I'm talking about these things at the start, because I'm also thinking, while I'm saying this, I'm also thinking about how I structure, like, introducing the topic, is because I think it's important to introduce these, like, cutoffs for abstraction early for the purposes of the discussion. Precisely, it's like the bedrock, the foundation from which all the other things I'm thinking are going to start. And, like, you can question these assumptions, but then we're having just basically a different conversation entirely. And one that I'm not actually all that interested in having, because if you want to convince me that you don't have free will, sorry, I just don't see the point in arguing it with you. Because if it's true, it doesn't change anything about anything. It doesn't change anything about my life. If I suddenly realize that my free will is fake, I still act like I have it. There's no meaningful difference there. Okay, so from this tangent, returning, we've got the definitions of subjective and objective, and then I was initially thinking that I should start with talking about subjective matters, because, well, my first thought was subjectivity is simpler, because the source of information for subjective claims, subjective opinions, is just you. Yeah, like, source, I made it up. That's subjective. But, like, instantly as I started thinking about it, I was like, hold on. It's not quite that simple, because it is absolutely possible Sorry, my ability to keep up is limited today. Alright. Don't worry about it. We are in high autism territory and it is late, and I genuinely couldn't tell you why my brain decided, yes, we are the exact kind of tired to tackle something like this. So I understand. See ya. Have a good something. And if you catch it later, then I'm always interested to hear what you have to say. Absolutely down for any kind of feedback, even if it is just you're a stupid lol. But I'll continue waffling on because I will probably listen to it later as well, and because I iterate on my thoughts like that. I listen to myself and then I figure out, does the guy have a point? Does he not? Oh, I don't want to die here. That would be kind of stupid. Low-key. Okay, so my first thought. I killed the tentacle for the 5th time. By which I mean second. We do a little exaggerating. My first thought was subjectivity is going to be simpler because you're making statements about your experience, your feelings, etc. Then surely that's just like the source of information is just you. And so that is simpler than when you make objective claims, which reference all sorts of things. They reference other people, they reference the world, the context, certain ideas. They have like a logical through line to them. There's like a law. There's a lot to the idea that there's a lot you introduce when you start thinking about objectivity and things independent of any particular person's view or opinion. But I started thinking about it more, and it appeared to me that, hold on, actually subjectivity is not that simple, because if you've ever seen a woman before, feelings are quite complex. Actually, if you've ever seen a human before, this is not exclusive to women, but I couldn't help but fit that joke in there. If you've ever seen a human, emotion, feelings, kind of complicated. And in fact, just like we don't have full access to the objective perspective on the world, we also don't have full access to the objective perception, like perspective on ourselves. Like we don't know everything about what we think and what we feel. And it's also something that we discover. So if you take the like subjective, even simple statements such as I like this movie, it's a statement that is in a way also objective. It's not, we would classify it as subjective because it's based on personal feelings, right? It's about personal feelings effectively. But if you look at it from another point of view, it's also just true or false. Like it's a statement that is in a way independent of personal feelings, because you either feel that way or you don't, or there's like there's shades of gray, right? There's fuzzy logic. You express truth as 1, falsehood as 0, and then there's like an infinite number of like an infinite gradient in between that more precisely illustrates concepts that can't be easily explained as binary, which is you get there very quickly with any degree of complexity of topics, of issues. So that is a new thought. I've not thought about this before. This just came to me that like it's that in fact subjective opinions, like what actually differentiates, what does it actually mean to be based on subjective feelings or views? Because that's another thing. Just because a statement, opinion, etc. is subjective or is objective doesn't mean it's true. It's like if my thinking for very like simply illustrating it for the purposes of the video is I display like a triangle, or like display a square and then ask, does the shape, like I say, this shape has 5 vertices. It's an objective statement. It's not my opinion, as in, it's not my, you know, I don't feel that the square has 4 vertices and it doesn't have 5 vertices. It's, you can measure it, you can check it, it's by all means objective, but the statement I've made about it having 5 vertices is just, is objective, it's just false. Objectively false. And like, similarly with subjective statements, like, I like this movie, I could lie about that. I could in fact hate the movie, but, you know, it's my, I don't know, it's my wife's favorite movie and I want to lie to her because I hate her, or whatever. That doesn't seem like a good idea for relationships, but you get the point, right? I don't want to make someone feel bad, so I can lie about what I actually feel. And you can probably come up with a more, less contentious example, and for the video I'm surely gonna do that. But you can lie and you can tell the truth about subjective, and you can also, and it also doesn't, you can also set, because lie implies intent. You can just make false statements without intent to mislead. You might just be wrong simply, and you might be wrong about what your emotional state is. You might be wrong about an objective fact that is independent of your emotional state. So the question is, can you make objective statements about your own emotional state? Because I think it is an interesting question to ask. Because in a way, our emotional state, our feelings, our intuition, etc. can't quite be... Oh, I'm playing so badly. Our emotional state can't quite be expressed in words. You lose something there. You lose something in the translation between the experience itself and then the description you have of that experience that is conveyable to others. So then when you make statements, you kind of necessarily objectivize what you are talking about. Because feelings, you can't convey a feeling to another person directly. Like, you can't wire a feeling directly to the brain in order to, it's like, this is how I'm feeling, and then you impact them with that feeling. We have empathy, which is kind of that, but we also can't verify it. So you don't actually know what the person is feeling. You can kind of imagine what you would feel in that situation, maybe. Especially if you've been in that situation, right? And then if you describe it, you can get a good idea that that person is probably feeling like similarly, but you don't have access to the feeling directly. So if you describe it, you are in a way objectifying something that is subjective, your subjective experience. And that's kind of the nature of language, because language is shared. And things that are shared to a certain degree have to be independent of the particular person. You can't, I mean, there's gonna be agreement in like that's one thing. There's gonna be agreement on that. You can unify that we feel the same way, approximate that also to like a degree that is just simply useful. We share this feeling for all intents and purposes, because we are all human and we have certain shared and common mechanisms that we can absolutely describe and share. I don't know, this is something I'm going to just think about still. I need to put more thought towards this, because this is a very interesting, just new idea that, like, actually what is a subjective statement if my description of my emotion is, from a certain point of view, an objective statement? Because I can, and then again it isn't, because, well, I can only describe what I'm feeling so well to what it actually is. Like, it's still, the actual feeling depends, it's inside of me, and it can't be put to paper or to like any sort of medium to directly transfer to another person. Okay, I think I'll put a pin in that thought and return to it later to not dwell on it forever, but I'm going to quickly note it down. I objectively feel that way. I think I'll remember what I meant. So it's not quite simple. It's not quite simple. So like the difference would be, because the example I have for the difference, for like to demonstrate the difference between objective and subjective, is I like this movie for the subjective, because, well, I like, that's dependent on what I felt about it. And then this movie is well made, is something that I can claim kind of independently of myself. Like, when this is well made, then I am implying that there's a standard which the work fulfills, which you can use the standard to kind of verify and validate that the work is good. Like, another question is whether we agree on the standard and whether the standard itself is solid and actually represents quality, but as far as, like, with the assumption of the standard, we can actually judge it objectively, is the point. But now with the thought about, like, you can make effectively objective claims about... I guess it's not an objective claim, because it depends on you still. Like, it's directly attached to your perspective and to your feelings and how you kind of conceptualize it and how you describe it. Because I think that maybe, like, another way to think about this difference is when we are talking about objective matters, there's a lot more that other people can do can bring up in an objective conversation, in an objective discussion, than in a subjective one. Because it's not that you can't have, because that's something that I've also heard and I don't agree with. It's like, oh, if it's all subjective, then we have nothing to talk about, because it's just, okay, you feel that way, all right. And then I guess if you start going into why do you feel that way, you start going into the objective, but that's not true, because once again, the things you can go into for why you feel a certain way do not have to be objective. They can also be just dependent on you, your past experiences, culture, whatever you think about it, like, internally and whatnot. That doesn't mean there's nothing to talk about. It means, however, that other people can't really... Like, other people, in order to help you work through a subjective perspective or, so, like, experiences and judgments, etc., they are kind of limited in the information they can get about the subject matter, because it's inside of you. And so, like, you need good communication in order to actually express correctly what is inside of you and how that functions. And then they also need a lot of they also need to be able to ask questions of you, and I think this is also, I don't quite know where to work it in in the whole, like, issue, but the issue of revealed preference, where both you and others see what you actually mean, value, what you consider important, by what you do more than by what you say. So there's also the aspect of you can kind of objectivize someone's subjective part, like, dependent on their views and perspective, if you see it in reality. It's like, oh, this person actually does what they say they would do. This person actually, like, their word can be trusted. It's accurate to reality, which effectively turns your subjective perspective, or like subjective statements, into, I guess, more objective ones, because it's less dependent on you, paradoxically. I'm not quite sure. I think there's going to be like another word in here that is going to describe what I'm trying to talk about that isn't subjective versus objective. It's maybe like descriptive. Because does that then mean the objective versus subjective is the difference is just the source of the information? And then if your actions speak about your internal state, then the statements about your state through those actions become a lot more objective, because then you can point to them, and other people can point to them, in order to determine, like, yes, this is what this guy actually believes, because this is how he acts. Like, you can see the fruit of his decisions and of his choices and of his values in what happens, what he chooses to do. That's an interesting thought. I tried to put a pin in it, and I kind of still am exploring it, because it's very interesting. I've never thought about this, and I've never heard anyone talk about this. It's very interesting. Okay, so maybe put a pin in that, and then, because this is kind of, because I tried kind of wrestling objectivity into subjective matters, and the other way, by which I mean subjective matter wrestling their way into objective matters, would be bias, I think, effectively, is what we would refer to, because in order to be objective, you need to eliminate all, or effectively all, like for the purposes of the conversation, all subjective influences. It's like, well, not necessarily eliminate, because I think that, like, eliminate is a bit harsh. Account for, or like counteract, maybe, because we don't, you're not gonna stop being human in order to judge objectively, but you can look for at the scientific method and the various ways you isolate causes and effects from each other. If you wanna, do we go there yet? No, we go there after. There. All right. That is how you account for bias, and you also do it through having many different people check the work from their different subjective perspectives and like arrive on a sort of consensus, which is not truth. Like, consensus isn't objective truth. Consensus is a lot of people agree that this is true, but we have many times in history had scenarios where most people agreed on something being true, and it seemed pretty sensible until it stopped. So not necessarily, so definitely don't assume something's true just because there's a consensus. And then also there's an advantage, because bias is a very negative word. You want to generally avoid bias. I think it's coded negatively, and for good reason as well. Because bias is effectively makes you see less clearly, but I think there can be, and I don't know if the word for this would be bias, but you can have a certain advantage from a certain point of view for talking about issues, and one such advantage for humans, well, is experience. Like, experience is something that on one hand biases your perspective, because you look at everything through the lens of your experience and what you've already had and know and experience. But on the other hand, you gain insight that nobody else is going to have if they don't have the same experience. Like, you can't look at a car the same way an experienced mechanic does. Mechanic. An experienced mechanic does. Because he's worked on many cars, and he's done a lot of things, and even if you think about it from a straight, like, physical point of view, his brain is just developed to operate in this realm, and this is something you can't quite get on that level. You can't get there. On one hand, he's going to be particular about how he approaches the subject, and on the other, he's going to actually have a perspective that brings him closer to the objective truth about a given scenario, because he actually has the equipment to deal with it, which is something that is like another factor, is that as you gain experience and improve in understanding, you also close certain approaches as unuseful, which you could say that, that makes your perspective more subjective, because it's more dependent on your personal, what was it, views and something, views or judgments. It's like, well, that's why the word judgment there is very, like, it lets in a lot of complexity, because a lot of my judgments are going to be based not just on what I feel, but on what I know, what I've developed, what I've tried, etc., on knowledge that I've had imparted on me, etc. So, like, obviously, my opinion's going to be based on my judgment, right? Like, how can I possibly have an opinion that isn't based on my judgment? So I think maybe the definition of objective in this case, because this definition of objective that we are working with here is the opposite of subjective, which makes it effectively an idealized scenario that is not reachable, which is kind of what I started with, that we don't have full access to objective reality directly, so we only approximate it to a certain degree. So everything we say and do is in a way subjective. Like, you can't get away from it. But on the other hand, we can't forget about the objective, and then we also, as something to strive for, we strive for objective truth, which we approximate better and better. I don't know, I'll listen to it later, I might consider that. I've been just running in circles. I'm not sure. As you can see, live thinking is not very structured, which is exactly why I'd rather have a script prepared for things of this complexity and figure it out over time. Very subjective of me. Okay. Yeah, there's a question of values, that's going to be a very big one. There's going to be contentious, certainly, whether the value is there objective value, and this is extremely, like, touchy within the realms of art, but I think just broadly in life, you're going to find very strong and hard disagreements between people who think that there is objectively good and objectively bad, versus people who are either moral or otherwise relativists. So, going by the criteria of practicality that I've established earlier for objective reality actually existing, I think by the same criteria, we have to say that values are subjective. And this is coming from a Catholic, from a Catholic that has a perspective and has a belief in objective morality and objective values, which is a funny kind of paradox or contradict. It's not contradictive. Maybe you could call it contradictive. I'm sure atheists would call it contradictive. So I'm not even necessarily opposed to it. But I do believe that you have to look at values as subjective, and different people choose different values and have different values depending on how they were raised and how they carried on in the life, what they choose, etc. They can choose. It's like I've heard the argument that everybody has a certain. Did I not spend the first point? I did spend the first point. Everybody has a certain good or evil. You go towards good and you avoid evil. But that is a useless definition, because what is good for that person is defined by what they go towards, and what is bad for evil for them is defined by what they go away from. And so that makes for a very directly circular definition, which is, as we've previously mentioned, not very useful. So, with that, we've got... Oh boy, I might be falling asleep rapidly. It's very hard to focus. Yeah, so we consider values to be subjective, as effectively everyone chooses their values, which is where faith actually begins. Because faith actually starts from this assumption, at least how I understand it. Faith starts from this assumption of you choose your values and asks you to choose God, which is not just which well, in Christianity more broadly than Catholicism, is a person, not just a value system. Although the two are somewhat related if you consider that God is everything. You know that? Well, not is everything, actually. It's complicated. But the point is, this is effectively the underlying assumption for faith to make sense, because it's something that you take on from, like, based on free will. You choose the values. You choose God. You are not forced to it. That's the whole idea. You were made, and then you get to choose, and you get to go away from God if you want. It's legitimately a free choice you get to make. There's consequences, but you do get to make the choice. So from that, then the question once again becomes, can there be objective anything if we fundamentally choose values? So then if you make a judgment, the values and judgments are effectively just the same thing. Like, you decide values by making judgments. You make judgments based on the value. It's effectively the same thing. And so the question is, if you make a judgment, doesn't that make it automatically subjective? And so I think maybe, and this is towards the conclusion to this whole line of thought, that maybe we think of objective, like objective statements, objective ideas, objective measurements, etc., more as tools than actual, like, the kind of going back to the idea that, you know, the correct relationship we have to the objective is that we approximate it and we don't have a perfect understanding of it and a perfect picture, etc., etc. So from this idea, we look at objectivity as a tool, And so this is an idea I've explored in a conversation, like after I published the response and we got into a little bit of talking. Oh, I should not be running into projectiles. Is that objectivity starts where you define an agreed upon standard. So objectivity is something you build and then you use between friendly people who would like to, well, build something together. You use it as a tool to build that thing. And, whoa, I'm dropping inputs, I think. When you want to build something together, do something, like achieve things, you need shared definitions and you need an objective framework, because as soon as you start building something that is greater than just one person, and even within one person, because we change over time and we don't necessarily, we have like contradictory, we resolve things within ourselves as if we had like contradictory sides to ourselves. You need to cut off the abstraction at some point in order to do anything. So, going kind of back to that idea again. So objectivity starts where we get standards and we define them, and then we can evaluate objectively based on that standard to the best of our ability. So for example, if I, this is a stupid example, but it kind of is going to be intertwined anyway. So if you want to define the standard that a movie is good when the majority of people say that they liked it, that they enjoyed the experience more than they didn't, that's a standard. Like, I'm not saying it's a good standard to judge movies or really much of anything with, but that is a standard, and you can then go, because like work on objectively using that standard by, for example, making polls, right? You show the movie to 100 people, and it's like you get however many they liked the movie, and if it's above 50%, then you consider the movie objectively good. It's like, well, but it might be just complete garbage. It's like, yes, but realize the assumption, right? We've assumed the standard that good, objectively good, for the purposes of this thought experiment, is that the majority of people find it, enjoyed it. It's enjoyable for the majority of people. So, like the objective good, the objectively good, the quote unquote objectively good statement is not full until you actually define what I just defined, which is the standard. The objectively good by itself, the only reason why people talk about it and it has any degree of any semblance of an actual conversation is because people come into discussions with assumptions and they don't realize it. So they have a standard for what they consider a good movie to be, and like some people have more objective standards, others have I liked it as the standard, which is, as going back to some statements about your feelings can kind of be objective. Like it is, this is how you felt / didn't feel. And then people discuss like, oh, this movie is good, or this movie isn't good, based on the unspecified and unrelated standards, and often to the credit of the people do not like just throw everything out, throw the baby out of the bathwater. They often discuss the standards kind of implicitly or even explicitly in the middle of that conversation. Did I really forget to shut off Discord? I did. My bad. Sorry. That was my notification, not yours. Sorry. Very sorry. I can't do anything to fix it now. So sad. And I lost my train of thought completely. That's excellent. So Yeah, so I think to the credit of the people that do talk about things like this, they do define the standard in the middle of the conversation, but it's usually like it's mixed with defining conformity to that standard, and it's often not explicitly specified and instead used as just, as a kind of assumption, or like this is how it is. Okay, let's get the chat back in this window. The popped out chat experiment, by the way, failed. It's not very useful. It actually introduces additional problems. So I'm not going to be doing that. So the kind of conclusion I'm leaning towards now, and I'm thinking I should maybe and probably wrap up, because I've had a lot of new thoughts already that I didn't quite prepare for, so I've got to figure out like a proper place for them in my general picture of the issue. And also I'm really tired. I can feel it slowing my brain down. It's not quite good. So I'm thinking about some kind of conclusion to this like rambling exploration, pondering, whatever you want to call it. Like the first assumption I make is that for practical purposes, values are subjective. And also judgments are kind of also like at a baseline, judgments are subjective because they depend on the knowledge and information and your brain processing, etc. However, because this is a discussion that is supposed to be also from the practical perspective, a lot of things that, if you look at the very like autistically direct definition of what is the perfect standard of objectivity, a lot of things you would consider subjective are for practical purposes of doing things and actually accomplishing, like sharing ideas and accomplishing things. You need objective tools, because objective tools and objective standards are what allow people to actually understand each other and share ideas and then build things that work beyond any particular person. It's like, I think the actual purest form of objective things is gotta be like the more abstract you go, the more purely objective it is, because the further you detach from direct experience of reality and the further you go into a kind of perfect land of ideas. So like the mathematics and those definitions of mathematical proofs, etc., are like the most objective things you can find, because mathematics is like, the whole point of mathematics is it is not based on anything, but it doesn't have to be. Like, it's not based on anything subjective. It's not based on like a feeling or whatnot. Like, it's based on axioms. So like there's base assumptions, and there's also like people make breakthroughs in defining what a number is. And it's like it's a big struggle to make things objective, independent completely of humans, and even then still, like, math wouldn't exist without the humans to actually process it and understand it, etc. Although maybe computers could do it on their own, who knows. Maybe we're gonna reach that point, which is going to be extra objective, maybe. So the abstract is, so like, just like abstraction in general, which is like a more perfect version of reality, in which some problems are a lot easier to solve than if you took a look at the concrete everything. Objectivity is also kind of like that. It's a very important tool. We can approximate it. We can, in fact, it's very, very useful, and you can't, if you want to do things, you can't discard it. But you have to remember that you do have your own brain, and so ignore that truth about yourself at your peril. And if you decide you are the source of objective truth, then you've effectively taken God's place. I'm fairly certain he doesn't like that. It's written somewhere in there, surely. In the Ten Commandments, in fact, it's written. Which is kind of, like, important, maybe. A little bit. Okay, I'm taking a look at this graph. Taking a look at my little diagram here that I've got. I'm not going into analysis versus synthesis. That's like a whole different topic, effectively. That's kind of a side tangent. Yeah, I guess because the whole issue of like verifiability, an objective claim being unverifiable doesn't make it subjective. It's like the majority of people like this movie it's not dependent on my view whether the majority of people like the movie, but then it's on one hand kind of verifiable because you can ask them in a poll, but on the other hand it's also unverifiable because you only have access to what they tell you, and you will never know how many of them actually lied. So, but that doesn't make the statement not objective. I don't know, I have got things to think about, man. I'm certainly glad I did go on this little journey, though. That's a lot of new fuel for the fire to consider, to think about. This might be my favorite little location in the game. I really like standing here as the little guy. Okay. Yeah, I think... Oh, there's also something about, like, the relationship between objectivity and quantifiable metrics. So, like, you've got review scores, which is like, the objective review score of giving a game a 7 out of 10. It's like, you can have a subjective score like that, that's just dependent on how you felt about it. You could have an objective score that calculated based on a standard, but usually like it's a big question of complexity that comes into it, where there's also limits to how much you can process and understand and properly connect together with your little brain. That makes it a lot more complicated to figure something like that out, and most likely if you can boil it down objectively to a number, then that number itself is not all that useful. Like, you can compare things between each other based on the number, but that number compresses so much information into so little information, it's effectively you can't reconstruct the original information out of it. So the reasoning behind the score is much, much more valuable than the actual number that you come up with at the end, I suppose. It's like a sorting mechanism, maybe, depending on how you use it. And then on the other hand, you can also go into the trap of like having so many variables and so many quantifications that the opinion effectively becomes nothing, because it has everything in it, every consideration, and it's too complex to actually do anything with. So there's, I guess, a sweet spot of how precise you want to be with your objectivity when you wield it as a tool. Alright, there's probably going to be another stream on this. Shoutouts Hunter, especially if he's listening to it afterwards. Congratulations, you've made it to the end. Thank you. And to everybody who ever stumbles on this material in the future, maybe, for some reason. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for hanging out with my little rambling session. Pondering even, maybe. And the topic will continue until morale improves, I suppose. Have a good one. Have a good night, good day, good whatever. I am going to very quickly escort myself to bed. Because, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm yawning, I'm sleeping. I'm tired. Good night. See ya. Goodbye.